Before Christmas came in blinking pixels and overnight shipping, it arrived slowly, wrapped in ritual, scent, and sound. In the 1950s, the holiday season unfolded like a story told year after year, one made of aluminum tinsel, handwritten cards, radio songs drifting through the living room, and neighbors singing on snowy porches. These weren't trends. They were traditions, stitched deeply into family rhythms and community life. Today, most have quietly disappeared, tucked into attic boxes and fading photo albums. But they're still there, waiting to be remembered. This video is your doorway back. We're uncovering 30 forgotten Christmas traditions from the 1950s that shaped the season in ways we rarely notice now. Stay with me. By the end, you may remember more than you expected. Before plastic garlands took over, Christmas trees sparkled with thin, shimmering strands of aluminum foil tinsel. Families opened the box carefully each year, flattening the delicate strips and hanging them one by one across the branches. Lights bounced softly against the silver, filling the room with a quiet kind of shimmer. Parents reminded children not to toss the strands, but to drape them gently. The tree never looked quite finished until the tinsel was in place. It reflected more than light. It reflected movement, conversation, and the slow rhythm of the season. After Christmas, each strand was gathered, smoothed, and saved for the next year. Even now, some old boxes remain in attic corners, the foil slightly bent but still shining with a familiar glow. Bubbling lights brought motion and warmth to quiet December nights. Each bulb held a narrow glass tube filled with tinted liquid. Once the bulb heated up, bubbles began to rise through the liquid, gently catching the light in slow, steady streams. These lights didn't blink or change color. They stayed still, except for the soft trail of bubbles inside. Trees felt more alive with them. Some families saved them for the front of the tree, where they'd be easiest to see. Children leaned in close to watch the first bubbles start. It felt like the lights were waking up. Their soft colors and slow rhythm-filled living rooms with a calm kind of joy. They didn't need to shine the brightest to leave an impression. For many, the bubbles became part of what made the tree feel finished. In many cities during the 1950s, Christmas began when Santa arrived at the end of a department store parade. Children stood in lines along the curb, scarves tucked over their faces, waiting to spot his sleigh moving slowly between marching bands and giant balloons. Stores prepared for weeks. Windows were dressed. Staff wore red. The streets felt transformed, not just by decorations, but by the crowd itself. Families stayed downtown afterwards, walking through store aisles trimmed in green, visiting Santa's chair, or simply admiring the displays. For some children, this parade was the only time they saw Santa in person. Photos were taken quickly. Letters were dropped in special boxes nearby. The moment passed fast, but it stayed sharp in memory. It marked a turning point in the season. Everything after felt different. The holiday had officially begun. A mailbox once told the story of the season. In the 1950s, handwritten Christmas postcards arrived from cousins, neighbors, and friends who had moved just far enough away to miss. These weren't long letters, but short greetings scribbled in pen and sent on cards decorated with bells, snow, and small printed wishes. Families often displayed them proudly, taping them around doorways or stringing them across the mantel. Some added notes about new babies or snowy weather. Postmarks mattered almost as much as the words inside. Kids sometimes checked the mail just to see if a new card had arrived. The mailbox filled slowly, one envelope at a time. And in the quiet ritual of reading them aloud, Christmas began to feel closer with every name and every familiar scrawl. Some traditions began with a knock and a chorus. Door-to-door caroling brought music into neighborhoods one porch at a time. In the 1950s, small groups of friends, neighbors, or church choirs bundled up in coats and scarves, walking slowly through snowy streets, stopping wherever a porch light was on. Songs like Silent Night or Joy to the World floated between homes, carried by voices rather than recordings. Some held songbooks, others sang from memory. A plate of cookies or a quick mug of cider might follow. Children joined in too, learning verses and melodies as they went. There was no schedule, but only shared goodwill and the joy of being together. By the time they reached the last house, the cold air didn't feel quite as sharp, and the quiet afterward felt a little warmer than before. Planning for Christmas once started in January. Families in the 1950s often joined holiday savings clubs at their local bank, depositing small amounts each week into a special account. The idea was simple: save slowly, spend comfortably. By December, the bank would send a check with the full total, just in time for gifts, food, and extras. It wasn't glamorous, but it worked. Some parents encouraged their children to add coins of their own, turning saving into a family habit. Clubs often handed out little passbooks to track each deposit. The final envelope felt like a quiet reward earned over time and made possible through patience. For many, that year-end check became part of the season itself. It wasn't just about money. It was about intention, consistency, and making Christmas feel prepared rather than rushed. For many families, the season wasn't complete without a holiday portrait taken at Sears. Dressed in their best sweaters or matching outfits, parents and children sat on studio benches beneath tinsel backdrops and artificial snow. The photographer gave gentle instructions. Someone always blinked. A few pictures ended with laughter. These portraits were often printed on glossy paper and slipped into Christmas cards or framed for the mantel. Some were stored away, only rediscovered years later. They weren't glamorous, but they captured the moment honestly. Each photo became a quiet record of how the family changed from year to year. Today, many of those prints live in old albums, their edges curled, their colors slightly faded, holding the kind of memory that doesn't need retouching. Not every ornament came from a store shelf. In the 1950s, many families crafted their own Christmas decorations, especially from felt. Parents cut shapes like stars, snowmen, and stockings, while children helped glue, stitch, and add buttons or sequins for sparkle. Each ornament had its own imperfections, which made it feel more personal. Names were sometimes stitched in white thread. Some were made at school and brought home proudly. Others were kept for years, packed away gently in tissue each January. These ornaments didn't match, but they belonged together. Hanging them was part of the tradition, not just the result. Even long after the colors faded or the edges frayed, people remembered exactly who made which piece. Their value came not from how they looked, but from how they were made by hand, with time, and with someone specific in mind. Long before pre-lit trees and themed decorations, families strung garlands of popcorn and cranberries to wrap around the branches. Popcorn was left out to dry so it wouldn't crumble, then threaded with a needle and string beside red cranberries for color. It was a quiet task that often took hours. Children sat cross-legged on the floor, slipping pieces on carefully, sometimes sneaking a few bites. Garlands were draped around the tree or hung above windows, sometimes even outdoors for birds to enjoy. When the work was finished, the house felt ready. The scent of cranberries mixed with pine, and the tree looked softer, more natural. After Christmas, the garlands were tossed outside or into the fireplace. They didn't last, but the act of making them became part of the season's rhythm. Before television filled the living room, Christmas variety programs came through the radio. Families gathered near the set to hear holiday broadcasts featuring singers, choirs, dramatic readings, and live orchestras. Stations like CBS and NBC aired seasonal specials hosted by well-known entertainers. The sound of sleigh bells or a familiar voice sparked immediate attention. Children listened in their pajamas, curled up on the floor. Parents folded laundry or dressed holiday cards while the radio played. Some programs included listener dedications or special Christmas stories that aired only once. There were no reruns. If you missed it, it was gone. These moments didn't rely on visuals. They created images in the mind: snowy streets, church choirs, families reunited. Long after the broadcast ended, the songs and stories remained, echoing in the quiet that followed. Giving gifts once included the walk to someone's front door. In the 1950s, it was common to leave small wrapped packages, baskets of baked goods, or jars of preserves directly on neighbors' porches. Some were anonymous. Others included a card tucked under the ribbon. Children often helped carry the bundles, their breath visible in the cold air. Recipients might open the door just in time for a wave and a thank you. These gifts weren't elaborate, but they meant something. They came without expectation. Sometimes the jars were returned later, cleaned and waiting for the next year. The walk itself became part of the tradition. It reminded people that giving wasn't about making a show. It was about showing up quietly with something thoughtful in hand. Many children in the 1950s had one outfit set aside just for Christmas. It might be a velvet dress with lace trim or a wool suit with short pants and suspenders. Parents planned for it weeks in advance, often laying it out the night before the big day. The clothing felt stiff at first, but wearing it meant something. It was for church, dinner, and the family photo in front of the tree. Shoes were polished, hair was combed, and everything had to stay neat until the day was done. These outfits were often worn just once, then folded into a box or handed down to a younger sibling. Seeing an old picture now, it's easy to remember how grown up it felt to wear something so carefully chosen. Before string lights came in every color, aluminum Christmas trees glowed with the help of a rotating color wheel. The wheel sat on the floor, casting red, blue, green, and yellow light up onto the metallic branches. As it slowly turned, the whole tree shifted color, creating a soft and steady show that filled the room. The lights didn't blink or flash. They flowed, making the tree shimmer like it was alive. Families often turned off other lamps just to watch it. The motor hummed quietly in the background, barely noticeable over Christmas records playing nearby. For many, the color wheel was just as magical as the tree itself. It didn't need anything else to draw a crowd. The way it transformed silver into something glowing and warm felt like part of the season's charm. On Christmas Eve, neighbors once gathered not just to celebrate, but to feed one another. Each family brought a dish like casseroles, baked hams, molded salads, or trays of cookies and set them on long, folding tables in basements or garages. Children played in the yard or watched holiday cartoons in someone's living room, while adults shared recipes and poured punch. Some families stayed for an hour. Others lingered until midnight. The food wasn't fancy, but it was made to be shared. Chairs were borrowed from nearby homes. Tables were crowded, but no one minded. These gatherings weren't about spectacle. They were about warmth, laughter, and the small joy of seeing the people who lived just across the street. Once the evening wound down, families left with full stomachs and leftovers wrapped in foil. It was simple, generous, and full of memory. Before digital greetings and inbox messages, holiday cards arrived by the dozens through the mail. Families displayed them proudly, taping them to door frames, pinning them along mantels, or stretching ribbon across the wall to clip them with clothespins. Each card was a sign that someone had thought of you. Some had glittery illustrations. Others included a family photo or a typed update tucked inside. Children helped open the envelopes and hung the newest arrivals with care. Over time, the display grew, filling rooms with red, green, gold, and silver. The names became familiar. Friends from church, cousins in other states, neighbors who had moved away. By Christmas Day, the house felt wrapped in greetings. Even after the season ended, the cards stayed up a little longer, as if holding on to the warmth for just a few more days. Elementary schools once ended the fall term with nativity plays performed by students for their families. Teachers helped children memorize lines, craft angel wings from wire hangers, or tie robes from old bed sheets. The auditorium filled with parents balancing cameras and coats, waiting for the curtain to rise. There were sheep made from cotton balls, wise men with cardboard crowns, and a wooden manger placed center stage. Not everything went according to plan. Someone forgot their line. A halo slipped off. But that was part of the charm. Afterward, there were cookies and punch in the hallway. Parents hugged their children proudly. Programs were folded and saved. These performances weren't polished, but they were heartfelt. They gave every child a chance to feel like Christmas belonged to them too, in a story they helped bring to life. Many homes in the 1950s welcomed visitors with a handmade wreath of pine, cedar, or fir hanging on the front door. Families gathered clippings from nearby trees or bought bundles at local markets. Wire frames or coat hangers were used as the base, then filled out with fresh greenery and decorated with bows, berries, or pine cones. Making a wreath became part of the season's early preparations, usually done around the kitchen table with the scent of sap filling the air. It wasn't about perfect symmetry or polish. The goal was to add something living to the home's entry, a circle of nature marking the arrival of Christmas. By New Year's, the needles would begin to dry, but for weeks, the wreath brought color, fragrance, and tradition to every doorstep. Before electric lights became the norm, some families placed real candles on their Christmas trees. Thin metal clips held each candle upright, carefully spaced among sturdy branches. Lighting them was a slow process, done once everyone had gathered and only for a short while. Adults stood nearby with pitchers of water, just in case. The glow was warm and flickering, casting soft shadows across the room. It felt both festive and sacred. There was no movement, just quiet admiration. Children sat still, watching the flames reflect on ornaments. The room stayed hushed until the candles were gently blown out. Though the practice faded for safety reasons, many still remember how it felt to see a tree gently lit by firelight. That short, careful moment often stayed in memory longer than the entire day. During the holiday season, it was common for groups to walk through neighborhoods collecting donations for local charities. Church youth groups, school clubs, or community volunteers carried cans or envelopes, often singing carols as they went. People expected them and kept coins or bills near the door. It wasn't unusual to find a paper tag left behind to show a household had given. Sometimes the collections supported food pantries. Other times they went toward warm clothing drives or Christmas dinners for families in need. The act of giving was part of the holiday rhythm. It wasn't planned around a campaign or an app. It happened face to face, one doorstep at a time. Small gestures carried weight, especially when the giver and recipient shared the same street. That kind of connection left a lasting impression. Kitchens in the 1950s were filled with pages torn from holiday issues of magazines like Better Homes and Gardens or the Saturday Evening Post. Recipes for cookies, pies, and party dips were carefully clipped, folded, and taped into notebooks or recipe boxes. Sometimes the pages stayed inside the magazine, marked with a folded corner. Families looked forward to the December editions, knowing they'd hold new ideas for the holiday table. Mothers tried a new fudge or salad mold. Children helped stir or roll. Even if the results weren't perfect, the recipe stuck around. By the next year, the page was splattered with vanilla or cocoa, proof that it had become part of the family's tradition. Long before recipe blogs or cooking shows, holiday inspiration arrived in print, and it stayed long after the season ended. Many homes placed small electric train sets beneath the Christmas tree as part of their holiday display. The trains ran on a circular track, winding around gifts and decorations. Children knelt to watch the wheels spin and the engine puff along its path. Some families added little villages or snowy scenes to make the setup more complete. As the train moved, it created a gentle rhythm that filled the room. The sounds became familiar background noise on Christmas morning. Setting up the track and fine-tuning the motor was part of the annual ritual. Even after the presents were opened, the train kept running for hours. Its motion added life to the quiet moments between meals and visitors. Long after the wrapping paper was cleared away, the train kept going. Before shiny wrapping paper filled store aisles, many families used plain brown paper tied with string or twine to wrap Christmas gifts. It was practical, inexpensive, widely available, and often repurposed from grocery bags or packages that arrived earlier in the season. Children sometimes decorated the paper with crayons or stencils, adding stars, trees, or handwritten names. Red ribbon or sprigs of pine helped make the package feel festive. Some gifts had bells tied to the bows. Others stayed simple. The wrapping didn't shout for attention, but it had a quiet warmth that made each gift feel considered. When placed under the tree, the parcels gave off a timeless, handmade look. Even without glitter or foil, those brown paper packages were remembered for the thought that went into them. On quiet December evenings, families often gathered around the dining table to work on a jigsaw puzzle together. It wasn't always about finishing it in one sitting. Some puzzles stayed out for days, with different family members sitting down whenever they had time. Holiday-themed puzzles were especially popular, like winter scenes, Santa's workshop, or snowy cottages with glowing windows. Sorting the edge pieces came first, followed by small victories as the center took shape. It gave everyone a shared activity that didn't need screens or noise. Some puzzles were used year after year, pieces slightly worn, corners soft from many hands. Once complete, they might stay assembled on a board until New Year's. Even if only a few pieces were placed each night, the puzzle brought people closer in small, familiar ways. When the house grew quiet and the tree lights dimmed, some families tuned in to midnight Christmas stories on the radio. These late-night programs offered a mix of holiday tales, dramatic readings, and gentle music meant to settle listeners into sleep. The voices came through clearly in the dark, offering warmth when everything else had slowed down. For children allowed to stay up, it felt like a reward. They might lie on the couch under a blanket, eyes closing while the story played on. Parents finished wrapping presents or sipped cocoa nearby. The stories weren't flashy or filled with noise. They felt like a whisper at the end of a long day. Though they weren't saved or recorded, the calm they brought stayed in memory well past the holiday. Homes in the 1950s often placed one candle in each front window during the Christmas season. These weren't fancy displays, just simple electric or wax candles with soft amber bulbs. They were lit at sunset and left glowing into the night, a quiet symbol of welcome and peace. Some households used real candles, lit carefully and watched closely. Others opted for plug-in versions with small plastic bases. The light from one window may have seemed small, but when a whole street joined in, it changed the way the neighborhood looked. The glow was soft, steady, and comforting. Each candle stood on its own, but together they marked the season in a way that felt deeply rooted. The tradition lived in the background, always there, without needing to say anything at all. Long before store-bought versions became the punchline of holiday jokes, fruitcakes were carefully made at home and often soaked in brandy for weeks before Christmas. Dried fruit, nuts, and spices were folded into a dense batter, then baked low and slow. Once cooled, the cake was wrapped in cheesecloth, soaked in liquor, and sealed in tins or jars. Families stored them in cool spots, sometimes basting them every few days to keep them moist. By the time they were sliced at Christmas dinner, the flavors had deepened, rich with spice and warmth. A thin slice went a long way. Not everyone liked them, but every household had at least one loyal fan. For many, the smell of brandy and spice meant the holiday had truly arrived, even before the first gift was opened. In many 1950s homes, holiday chores were divided by tradition rather than assignment. Parents and children knew what needed doing, and everyone played a role without much discussion. Some were in charge of polishing silver or ironing linens. Others cleaned windows, hung garlands, or handled grocery lists. Even the youngest helped sort ornaments or sweep pine needles. The task signaled that something special was coming. It wasn't just about getting things done, but rather it was the way the home changed little by little in preparation. Though not glamorous, these routines shaped the memory of Christmas as much as gifts or music did. The smell of wax polish, the sound of the vacuum, and the clatter of dishes felt like holiday season signals in their own right. Woven into the rhythm of December.in, neighborhoods with frozen ponds, Christmas break often meant ice skating parties with friends and family. Children laced up their skates by the fire, bundled in layers, and headed outside as soon as the ice was thick enough. Someone always brought a thermos of hot cocoa. Others pulled sleds with blankets and snacks. The pond became a hub of laughter, with skates carving loops across the surface and mittens tossed to the side. Afterward, everyone returned indoors with red cheeks and sore ankles, warming up next to the heater or stove. It wasn't a scheduled event, rather it just happened when the weather allowed. There were no lights or speakers, only the sound of blades and voices. For many, the pond itself became a kind of seasonal landmark that signaled the holiday had truly arrived. Some local organizations arranged for volunteers to call children pretending to be Santa Claus. Parents provided names and details ahead of time, what the child wanted, how they'd behaved, favorite pets or teachers. Then, on a chosen evening, the phone would ring. A deep voice would greet the child by name, ask about their wish lists, and remind them to keep being kind. It felt magical, especially in a time before caller ID or smartphones. The phone call often became one of the most memorable parts of the season. Parents listened quietly nearby, sometimes smiling, sometimes tearing up. The call didn't cost anything. It was simple, personal, and filled with joy. The moment passed quickly, but children talked about it for weeks, repeating the words back as proof that Santa really knew them. Stockings in the 1950s were often handmade, stitched with care by parents or grandparents. Red felt was common. But every family added their own touch: names in white thread, applique stars, sequins, or fringe. Some were made during the year and saved for December. Others came out every Christmas and were repaired gently when seams wore thin. They weren't always symmetrical, and they rarely matched, but they held meaning in every stitch. Children waited eagerly to see them filled, and many remembered the exact sound of the nails being tapped into the mantle. Stockings were as much about anticipation as what ended up inside. Oranges, peppermint sticks, and tiny toys were just part of it. What mattered most was seeing your name across the top, knowing it would be there again next year.